What's in your attic? All right, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about attics and what I find when I'm inside an attic. Lately, a lot of customers have been asking me, hey, what are you looking for in the attic? Can I take a look up there? I don't want my client climbing my ladder for safety reasons and insurance reasons, but they're very curious. So I tend to put good photos in the report to show them what I found and so forth. But what I want to talk about today is the problems I find up in the attic. There's a lot of issues up there, and some can be some pretty serious safety issues regarding electrical. So you got to be really careful, first of all, when you are going into an attic access, which is typically in a ceiling. You got to be careful of what is around the edge of that opening. A lot of times I'll poke my head up in there and there's open junction boxes right there and everything else, and it's just like knob and tube wiring, just really unsafe wiring. And if you happen to grab that, not knowing what you're doing, maybe you grabbed it to pull yourself in, I don't know, but you got to be really careful with that stuff. So that's what this video is about today. So we're going to show you a whole bunch of issues I find during the attic inspections and what I commonly find. All right, let's get into some talk about attic inspections and what I typically find during an attic inspection. So first thing you need is a ladder. Find the access hatch and climb on in, just like I'm doing right here. And by the way, you need a really good headlamp and a flashlight for this. Bam. Okay, so this attic here is a very tall attic, which I'm able to walk around freely, which is nice. Most attics are not this big. This is out of a 1920s house. And yeah, this house had a lot of issues, as you're about to see in this video. Okay, attic framing. This is one of the things I'm looking at when I'm in your attic. And right off the bat, we see what looks like termite damage. You may have seen some other videos from my channel in the past, and I do cover termite extensively with a termite inspector, so you should check out that video. But this is really badly damaged here. So this damage has probably been going on for quite some time, and no one ever noticed it until I got there. So there you go. Termite poop. Okay, right here I'm pointing out wood shingles. So a lot of times from the outside of the house, you'll see just regular shingles, composition shingles. But then when I get in your attic and I spot this, that means you have multiple roof layers. And that's just not a good idea to have that much weight on your roof. And having multiple layers does not make your roof any better, watertight wise. And that little piece of wood I just pointed at was a just poor framing upgrade. Has more wood shingles here. It's a different attic. Okay, so why is this framing black? Because this is evidence of a past fire that took place in this attic. And this is something I found out that's typically not disclosed to buyers. Every time I find this, no one's aware of it when I have to tell them at the end of the inspection. So these things do happen. Sometimes there's fires, and it just gives it a charcoal look. But overall, typically when I see this, most of the damage was removed, and all you're seeing is discoloration now. So in this attic, I noticed some water stains on this drywall. And the reason why there's drywall in the attic is because this is a townhome, and there's another unit on the other side. So the drywall works as a fire barrier. As you can see, the stains, so they're coming from the roof, and the plywood is also stained. So this leak could be going into both units. Roof definitely needs to be inspected by a roofing company now. Attic insulation and lack thereof. Here's a flipped home. They installed a new heating and cooling system in it and didn't even insulate the attic, which is a total waste of money. Because all that heating and cooling that you're supplying into the house is just going to escape right through the ceiling. And here's a bunch of missing insulation on a different attic, which is very common to find. And the insulation amount here is inadequate anyway, which is another thing I commonly find. Attic plumbing. All right, so what's this black thing sticking through the attic's floor here? Oh, that's called a plumbing vent, and that's to take all the plumbing gases out of your bathrooms and kitchen and vent them out to the exterior of the house. But as you can see, they left these plumbing vents in the attic without finishing them off and extending them through the roof. So these plumbing vents may allow plumbing gases to escape into the attic, which may work their way back into the house, and you'll get some unpleasant odors. Commonly found on a flipped house as well. And wait for it. Yep, there's one more. This is all in the same attic. Those 3 plumbing vents that were just terminating right in the attic. Okay, so this is a flipped house. And what I just showed you in the attic here, you got 3 plumbing vents that are not even terminating through the roof. They're just terminating in the attic. The funny thing is they took the time to terminate the bathroom exhaust vents, but not the plumbing vents. I don't understand the logic behind that, but I would have rather have it the other way. So this is what happens when I look in attics on flipped houses, and this is what you get. Okay, attic HVAC. This can always be challenging. So right here, I'm just pulling off a inspection cover on a furnace. If your furnace is in the attic, then this is what I'm doing while I'm in the attic. I'm checking out the box, see if there's any rust in there, anything out of the ordinary. Is the exhaust vent fastened properly so the exhaust gases escape through the roof? So there's a lot of little things I'm looking at here. Sometimes the filter's up here in the attic as well. And yeah, so this one looks pretty good. It's a newer unit, so it should be okay. And right here, I'm just checking the data tag on an older unit just to try to get you an idea of how old your furnace is. And yeah, I take a lot of pictures of everything. So right there, I'm just taking a picture for the report, documenting the data tag. Okay, I want to share this little exciting find I just came across. And right here, I'm in an attic right now, and what we got is our forced air furnace over here, and then we've got our exhaust and intake pipes right here, PVC ones. And you're probably wondering, well, why is that PVC pipe sitting on the floor like that? Well, that's a good question. And why is this one here so loose as well and just want to come apart? It's apparently this is a filter opening, and I did notice it as I was checking these pipes. So out of my curiosity, I wanted to open it because I noticed downstairs there is a filter in the wall. And I'm like, well, maybe, let me make sure there's no filter in here. Sure enough, there was a filter in here. And to get the filter in and out, you literally have to disconnect this from this, and this here needs to be disconnected as well to get the filter out. So here's the filter. It is absolutely clogged. Who knows how many years that's been in there. There's the backside. And so we had 2 filters running in this property here on this HVAC system, which is never a good idea. Too much restriction on the unit. So I'm just blown away that somebody installed this system and left all these pipes. They're not even glued. These pipes are just not even fastened. They're just, oh, let's just leave them loose and we'll just take this thing out when we need to. So this is just a really bad idea. Really poor installation here. So what I'm going to do is put this filter cover back in place here. We're going to slide this back in. And we're not going to put the second filter back in because that's just not going to help the system, right? So let's just slide that in as best we can all the way down. Better. 2 hands. Yeah. So this whole thing needs to be taped and sealed off. This is no longer going to be the filter point here. There's a hole right there. All that needs to be sealed up. And I noticed when the system was running, I just noticed a lot of airflow. The insulation was blowing around back here. So I know there's a leak on that side too. So I'm going to recommend to my client that this duct be tested for leaks. And I did notice there's a lot of duct tape in several areas. Just looks like a quick repair. And a lot of this duct right here, this is the original 1990 duct. And then it's been taped to hell, as well as other areas of the duct as well. And some of it's been replaced, as you can see. This is the newer stuff. So I'm glad we came and looked at this today, because this filter may not have been noticed and gone unnoticed for quite a long time. All right, so that's that. Another successful HVAC inspection from the attic. And hey, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. All right, so here's a AC condenser line in the attic, and there's no safety pan under it. So it's a double whammy here. That thing's going to leak because the pipe's disconnected. However, there should be a safety pan under it, which would catch that water if it was leaking. So two things need to be done there. And right here, you see these blue stains on the ducting and on the ceiling below. Well, that's from the insulation line between the indoor coil and the outdoor condenser. There's no insulation on it. So when it gets hot in the attic and that AC is running, it sweats and it just drips water, and that's how you get water damage and mold inside your attic. Here's another unit with no safety pan under it, and I noticed some discolored insulation below it, which is another indication that it is leaking and dripping. So when the AC is running, there's a constant drip right there. So that needs a safety pan to catch that condensation and run it out to the outside where those white PVC pipes are. This cabinet right here, this is leaking air conditioning into the attic while the AC is running. So there needs to be a rubber seal there that apparently is missing. So it's just blowing air and wasting energy right there. This is a good one. I love this one. They used exhaust duct for like a bathroom fan for the exhaust, for the HVAC duct for the air supply. Stupid. And here's a safety pan that should have been installed into the previous two units, but this one's full of water and it's building up rust on the pan, which is not a good thing. So that drain line may be clogged, so that needs further evaluation. Now right here, people ask about asbestos. Okay, so this box in front of us here, the silver box, that there is part of the HVAC ducting, and that is wrapped with what's called alumibestos. So this home's probably early 1970s or late 60s. And as you can see, it's loose, so that means it's probably leaking. And as I get to the other side, yeah, if you look down there with the flashlights pointed, you'll see that that whole vertical run going from the attic all the way down to the first floor is also wrapped with that same alumibestos. So this is what I find in a, in 1960s, early 1970s home is very common if it's original. So that three-way connector there, that's also alumibestos. And this duct here is loose. It's not taped properly. It looks like rodents were chewing on it. And that white part of the duct is probably asbestos wrap. Same here. It's probably asbestos wrap on there. If you had it tested, it'd probably test positive for asbestos particles. And this duct also damaged by pests and rodents, probably rats up in the attic. Very common thing to happen. And the white part of that is also most likely asbestos. Now this here is also known to contain asbestos. It's called transite exhaust vent pipe. This is an older house for like an old furnace or a water heater that might still be in service. So it's just an old building material. It's fine if you leave it there, but if you're taking it apart like this piece here, this piece was left behind because somebody removed this in a different attic, and they shouldn't have done that. They should have wrapped this up in plastic and properly disposed of it. You don't want that rolling around in your attic. Because if it gets disturbed, it can allow asbestos material into the air, and that's what you don't want. And that's a bathroom exhaust fan with just terminating into the attic. So it's missing its exhaust hose. And this is an old vent they just left there instead of ripping it out and sealing it off. Just poor, cheap work on a flipped home. And that's a kitchen exhaust, the wrong material for the exhaust, and it stops and terminates in the attic. And this is a good one here. Look at this kitchen exhaust right here. They laid it down on the floor instead of going straight up through the roof. People are so lazy. And they ran like, what, 15 feet of this metal duct, which is way more expensive than running it through the roof. Come on. Just sloppy work. Over here, we got split rafters in the attic on an old 1920s house, or could be 1908 to 1920. And see, these are 2x4s. Back then, they built with very thin wood. Nowadays, that would be a 2x8 or a 2x10. As you can see, most of this attic was reframed, the ceiling, but not all of it. And then you see they left all this debris behind. There's an old window sitting there. It's just ridiculous how people do work. I don't know how anybody sleeps at night doing this kind of work. But this attic is a mess. The insulation's missing in lots of areas in the attic, and the insulation that is there is inadequate anyway. And they ran these plumbing vents. There's another bathroom exhaust fan right here disconnected. It's not even terminating outside. You got these poor framing upgrades supporting this roof. And then look at the plumbing vents, the black PVC pipe. It's instead of running it all the way up to a nice high point in the ceiling, they just leave it there and you got to walk over it to get around. That's just poor work. This HVAC ducting also, it would have been way better if they suspended it from the ceiling so it's not on the floor of the attic. Somebody with a big attic like this, you want to put plywood down and you just use it for storage. But with all this ducting laying there, you know, it needs to be it needs to be reinstalled. It's just poor work. Okay, attic electrical. Now we're getting into fire hazards. This stuff is absolutely horrible. Look at this. This is a mixture of knob and tube wiring with insulation, Romex wire, and look at this, knob and tube buried in insulation, which is a no-no, and it's live. This is still in service. This particular attic was just a fire hazard from the start. Look at this, a buried junction box, and these two stubs are sticking out, and they're live. One of them is the hot wire's live. But if somebody was crawling through here and didn't see that and put their hand on it and it was bare, you're going to get electrocuted. This is really dangerous conditions right here. And this attic, look at this. You got wires spliced together, Romex connected to the old original wire. It's just a nightmare. This is nuts. And this is right by the attic access. So if you reached up and put your hand in there and didn't see that, you could electrocute yourself by grabbing that wire. So these are major issues right here. And this is one of the main things I'm looking for. That's why I always bring the electrical sniffer with me in the attic. Look at this. 2 fuses that are still in service. Live wire right next to the opening. Bad condition. And here's an attic that had an electrical upgrade. The panel was upgraded. Then I get inside the attic, and this thing was, somebody went up there and put all this pink fiberglass insulation in over knob and tube wiring. It was everywhere. And luckily some of it was exposed so I could see it, and I traced it, and I couldn't believe how much was up there. So once again, knob and tube wiring should not be in the presence of insulation. My recommendation here is to have all this insulation vacuumed out, have the whole attic cleared out, and then go through and replace all this wiring with new Romex. This is how fires start, people. You start there's a whole bunch of storage in this attic too, which makes it even worse. It's just, you know, as a homeowner, I don't expect you to know these things, but, you know, the people that did the work on this house, shame on them. I was in this attic for a good 30 minutes tracing this wire. It's on both sides. I went underneath the AC unit. And look at over here, they got stuff everywhere. There's insulation upside down, just laying everywhere. It's just sloppy. Really sloppy work. And this is somebody trying to sell their house. Well, remember earlier in the video, I showed you the previous fire damage on an attic, and this could be what caused that electrical fire. So here we go, more live wire. And it's all connected to Romex on the other side of that duct right there. Just an accident waiting to happen. Okay, so hey, let's have a little rat poison here. Yeah, be careful when you're up in an attic and you see that. Don't go near that. You don't want to accidentally touch that and then touch your mouth or something. Right here's a dead rat who was dining on that green poison I just mentioned, but I got to be honest, this rat scared the shit out of me. I was not expecting to see it, and when I leaned over, I was like, whoa, I thought it was alive. Right here I'm pointing out the red stamping on the copper pipe. That means it's type M copper, which is the cheap stuff. Type L copper is the one you want. Okay, right here there's a back. This is the back of a furnace. And a reason why I'm putting this in this video is I want to show you what it looks like when your furnace is installed backwards. The inspection covers are on the other side, which I have a really hard time accessing. So whoever installed this was not thinking. This whole thing should be turned around. And now they have ducting everywhere, so it makes it even harder to get around the other side. But hey, I got to take a look at the front of this unit. And the only way to get there is to crawl through this duct. So I want to give you a little POV perspective of what it's like crawling around an attic if you haven't done it yet. Be careful where you're stepping. Make sure you always step on wood. Do not step into the insulation. You will go right through the ceiling. And you could injure yourself as well. Or somebody below that's in the house. Just take your time when you're in an attic. Slowly crawl around. Don't be in a rush. And don't bang your head on the wood framing above your head, because that hurts. I've done it too many times. So this is what I have to go through sometimes to get your attic inspected. And as you can see, I had to fight my way through all this duct to get to the front of the furnace, which should have been facing the other direction. Not to mention there was a junction box right there on the way into this area that was wide open and loose and not even mounted, as I'm getting to it right now. That junction box right there on the bottom right, that's wide open. It's not even fastened. It's just laying there. See how loose it is? I just picked it up. So yeah, this is just a bad situation. By the way, the furnace should be accessible by means of plywood, starting at the attic access opening all the way to the furnace. And that is not the case here. I had to crawl around and find my way through here. So there's a lot wrong with that situation. And here's me saying, sayonara. Thumbs up, I made it to another attic. All right, I got a bit of news to share with everybody. I recently started a podcast called Home Inspection Authority Podcast. You can get it on Apple Podcasts, you can get it on Spotify, Google, and several other podcast platforms. Reason for the podcast is because every day I go through the same thing with customers and realtors. It never seems to change. So I think addressing some of the issues that I run into constantly was a good idea. For example, the unrealistic expectations with home buyers and with some of their realtors can be pretty overwhelming. And I thought that was a good thing to talk about. So the episodes I'm doing are addressing each one of those as I experience them. So for example, the first podcast was about setting expectations when you're buying a 1908 house. I mean, that thing's really old, right? So there's going to be some things you should expect to find when you're looking at that house, when you're going through your inspection process. When I have to tell somebody they have a brick foundation or their foundation's in really bad shape on an old house like that, it's mind-blowing to them. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, what do you mean, what do I mean? This house is like 120 years old. What did you think was going to happen? I mean, these flipped homes that are built in the early 1900s don't come with new foundations, okay? And most of the time. Sometimes there will be a foundation upgrade, but very rare. So anyway, that's the purpose of the podcast. And why did I start a podcast? Well, I was inspired by one of my customers who hired me a few times, and he felt that I had a lot of good information to share with people, and I'm like, wow, I never thought of having a podcast before. So a week or two later, I went live with it, and now I'm on episode 5. So I hope to do a new episode every week. Please check it out. I think you'll find it very useful, whether you're a homeowner, a home buyer, or a realtor, or a home inspector. All of you will get some information out of this, especially if you're a new home inspector. I think you'll find it very useful. So check it out, leave a review if you like it. If not, sorry.